I think that more than 50% of all dairy products will be non-animal sourced by 2035. You can produce products that are more nutritious than what you can do from animals. You can produce products that are completely novel, and everything just points towards a reality in which the targeted way of fermentation production in food is so superior to animals, also in terms of cost, that there will be no reason to not have this as the absolutely dominating technology in food in general.
Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO, where we have engaging conversations with leaders in the plant-based community. I'm your host, Anant, and today we're thrilled to welcome Raffael von Gensinger, founder and CEO of Formo, fresh off securing an impressive $61 million in Series B funding. Formo is making waves with their innovative fermentation technology. We'll be delving into their recent success, exploring their groundbreaking expansion into retail, and discussing the science behind their micro-fermentation process. So, Raffael, welcome to Plant CEO. I'm super excited to hear about Formo's journey and your vision for sustainable and animal-free dairy.
Thanks so much for having me, Anand. Really looking forward to the conversation. It's been a while coming, so happy to be here now.
I think we probably spoke, was it about a year ago? And
Yeah.
we've been looking at your journey, and I think now is a great time to get you on the show. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
So let's start with, I guess, kind of like the basics. Can you explain what micro fermentation is to our audience and how it differs from precision fermentation?
At Formo, we're actually doing both precision fermentation and micro fermentation. The products that we just launched now in retail are micro fermentation based products. The difference between the two is that one involves genetic modification on the strains, on the organisms that produce the certain compounds that you're producing through fermentation. So if you look into our technology on casein production, for example, where our bacteria and fungi are producing a bovine protein, right? There is genetic modification involved on the strains that these strains are producing these proteins. If you look into the microfermentation side, it's kind of similar in a sense that you're using fermentation to produce certain proteins or compounds. You're optimizing the bioprocess, pH, temperature, fermentation length, feedstock, etc. And you're optimizing also on the food science side, so product functionality, product performance, etc. The difference is that compared to precision fermentation, you're not genetically modifying these organisms to produce, in this case, the proteins that we're looking for. So they're kind of native to that host you're working with or to that organisms you're working with. So in our case, we're using a kochi fungus. And we're using kind of like the native proteins of that fungus. So the proteins that fungus would produce naturally without, let's say, genetic modification in the process.
So koji is also used a lot in Japanese cooking. So for example, for making fermentation process in soya sauce or sake, for example.
Correct.
So how did you, I guess, discover that, first of all? Was it widely being used by other people as well?
So the kochi, or in scientific terms, Aspergillus oryzae, is a fungus that is being used not only in, as you just described, the Japanese kitchen, or let's say the traditional kitchen in fermentation, but also recently has been used widely for precision fermentation, right? So it's kind of like an organism that exists in both worlds, so to speak, which was exactly why it was so interesting for us, because on one side we have been working with this Aspergillus also on different proteins on the precision fermentation side, but then we also thought, hey, this is a fungus that is already, has been consumed for millennia, is safe for consumption, and thus it kind of triggered our interest to see, like, okay, is that fungus producing something that we could already use today, get to market quicker? That's why it was so interesting for us, and this is when we started to look deeper into that organism, really, for production of proteins.
I guess that's what's made you get into the market quicker. You've just launched now in 2,000, I think, stores of Rewe, the German store, Billa, Metro stores, and that's across both Germany and Austria. What does this retail expansion for you actually mean?
It's a big question, right? It means a lot. It means a lot. I mean, it means a lot for us as a company, but also means a lot for me personally, right? From like starting working on this idea. 2016 was the first time I thought about this. 2018 was when I jumped into it, and 2019 is when we formally incorporated the company. And being here years after starting this company and seeing that products actually hit the shelf is really amazing because, of course, I started the company with this big desire to change the food system. But then, of course, when you work on a biotech-based solution, it involves a lot of research. It involves longer timelines usually to actually have a product, which then in performance is much better than some of, let's say, the low-tech innovations. But still, obviously, I'm a very impatient guy. And so I was looking forward to actually launching these products. So it means really the world to me that we have products in the market and, really see the impact with the consumers and start to replace some of these products that are animal based or offering a bigger variety to consumers. So for me it's really huge. For us as a company on many levels is an amazing milestone that we've hit. The whole biotech food space obviously is in a situation or is in a state where just things take longer and there's not many products hitting the market, specifically in Europe. And so for us as a company to show like, hey guys, this is not just like a vision of the future, but it's really already here. And it's not just a launch where we go into a couple of restaurants and selling a few kilograms of product, but really we're out there in thousands of POS selling tons of product, like on a big scale, is a really positive sign also for the wider industry and for us as a company and for the teams who have been working on this day and night over the past years. It's just a huge boost to finally see the products hitting the shelf. So I think it's it's massive for us as a company, but also for the industry. And then, as I said, for me personally, it's great anyways.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great to see it in shelves now. And what's been the consumer reaction to the products? And it's camembert and it's soft cheese, right? That you've developed.
So fresh cheeses, different fresh cheeses, then so that's spread like a natural with herbs, with tomato, then a soft cheese, so like a camembert like cheese. And now there's a couple of other hitting the market over the next few months, like a Greek feta cheese, a blue cheese, and reception has been really amazing. So we were actually above target with the sales numbers in the first month now, which is
Brilliant.
really exciting. And
Yeah.
also challenged, by the way, for our operations team, because we're coming out of a couple of years of R&D, and now to be a company that actually is in market, for the commercial teams and the operation teams is a massive thing to actually pull off, and our CMO partners as well. And so when all of a sudden more orders than what you're anticipating, you got to be very quick and very hands-on to actually deliver on that scale.
You're working with a co-manufacturer in this process that you've created?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're working with a couple of co-mans actually here out of Germany.
Yeah.
Amazing partners who've been working in the dairy industry for a long time.
That's awesome. And are you thinking now, in terms of the success that you've had in Germany and Austria, to expand in other parts of Europe?
Yeah, totally. So we're already looking at different markets. I mean, I think Switzerland and the Netherlands are the ones that kind of are naturally evolving from Germany and Austria. It's also where we have very strong ties with market players already. But we're also looking beyond that, right? Something that we're very mindful of is, and I think we learned also from some other food companies that have come before us and have scaled before us, to get the right balance between rapid expansion, but also focus to really nail countries before we expand too much and spread ourselves thin. But of course, we're also
Totally.
looking beyond Europe right now. So there's a couple of cool things coming next year.
Let's walk through, I guess, your growth and especially your recent funding round of $61 million, which is amazing, by the way. And congratulations for securing that. I think that's probably,
Thank you.
is that the biggest for an alternative plant-based company doing fermentation, especially in Europe?
In Europe, for sure. And in the last 18 months, I think it is also the biggest beyond Europe, just
Amazing.
because obviously the industry has been in a very tough spot, really.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, the tough spot. What do you think has slowed down the investment or appetite? And what's made you, I guess, reverse that to some degree?
A couple of things. I mean, it's not just biotech or food tech or the combination of the two that has been hit hard, right? I mean, obviously, just like general market environment and climate has been super tough and in decline in general. So, also other tech industries have been hit hard, I would say. And that we've seen first in the public markets, and that has obviously trickled down into the private sector subsequently. So that was no different for food or biotech in general. I think where our industry has been suffering a bit more is obviously that the timelines involved to get these products out, their potential is massive, but obviously also the timelines to actually bring them to market are a bit longer than some other types of tech innovations. And in this economic downturn that we have, where everybody just wants to have their small return rather tomorrow than a big return, in a couple of years, it's just been hard to kind of continue to fund these businesses, I would say. The other thing that we've also seen, and this is probably where we've done a really good job, is expectations have not been met, I'd say, in the past few years, where the industry was obviously already talking about scaling on a massive level, delivering to retail, etc. And we've seen, close to none products or companies who've actually been able to deliver this. So of course, I think one of the reasons why we were able to raise this round is that we've actually shown that we can launch in retail, that we can produce on these levels, that we can manage the supply chain, and that consumers are buying the product. So we've kind of went from, hey, we have this big vision, great technology in the future, to actually saying, hey, it's real, it's already here right now, and making good revenue with that and with profitable products. That's definitely been one. We've done a great job and also have convinced investors that this is not just a promise in the future. A couple of other companies have done a good job as well. But of course, we've seen a huge hype in food biotech in 2019, 2021, big investment rounds, obviously also a real hype. And now I think we're somewhat in a valley of more scrutiny, kind of going back to the fundamentals as well, which is going to be great. I think great companies will come out of this time. And then once we see the whole industry stabilizing, it's going to be massive.
Can you talk a little bit about the investors who came in this round and what sort of strategic vision they share with you? I think it's a great model to have both micro fermentation and precision fermentation technologies working in dual, just so that you also get market awareness initially. So it makes complete sense that you've gone this route. So yeah, it'd be great to hear more about your investors that you're working with.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it, which is that, we see a lot of synergy between micro fermentation and precision fermentation. Specifically on the production side, those are roughly equivalent or the same, really. Of course, on the strain engineering side, they're different, but everything that you need to manage, from the fermentation process to the downstream process to the product production to working with your CMOs, supply chains, bringing product to market and commercialization, there's so much overlap. So one of the things that everybody is looking for and was looking for is, okay, what tells me that you as a company actually have the quality not just to, develop technology, but then really to sell products. And so this is where a lot of the investors that have come into the round have been really excited about Formo specifically. We've brought in Reve, obviously, who is not only our retail partner, but now also one of our shareholders. And I think it's a perfect time to actually team up with a retailer this moment. We always have been looking into, more strategic investors in the past, but I have always felt that, it would be too early to actually bring in some of these guys, whether it's retail or big dairy, just because we felt like we're not yet there where we can deliver, in the hundreds of tons of product. And so the value for us would be limited. But now I think in this moment where it's all about performance in the market, working with the expert in the market, and Reve is the second biggest retailer in Europe. It's just massive for us, in terms of the support we're getting, the insights we're getting. Someone else we brought in is Seven Ventures, which is the venture arm of ProSiebenSat.1, so one of the biggest media houses in Europe and the biggest in Germany.
Yeah.
And there, obviously, it's a lot about marketing and branding, right? Kind of raising the awareness of the products. And so we have entered into this, I think, really cool constellation where on one side we have Reve as our retail partner, we have Seven Ventures as our marketing and branding partner, which is obviously something where we can leverage our resources much more. And they're also putting in some of that power and marketing capability into the relationship. And then we brought in a couple of different players, American investors, because of course that is a market that is interesting for us, some Japanese and Asian investors as well, who will help us with expansion in those markets. And then, of course, just the follow on from our existing investors from, EQT, Lower Carbon Capital, Food Labs, M Ventures, Grazia, and a couple of others, basically, who just continued to support us on this journey. And maybe the last thing here, the idea really, or the shareholder base that we have built, I think by now is super resilient in a sense that we have really global coverage. We have a good chunk of American investors. We have really strong European investors, and by now also really, really strong Asian investors. So that helps us also, I think, to balance a bit these different hype cycles, right? When the industry is hyped somewhere but really down somewhere else, you balance it out a bit better. And also it helps with market expansion going forward, and having the perspectives and insights from investors from different parts of the world as well.
That's brilliant. I find what you said there about ProSieben. So obviously, my day job's in marketing, and I spend a lot of time also in the world of retail media. So I guess getting the consumer insights from Reve would be really crucial, also to feed that back to ProSieben, who can then help how you should be spending your retail media money as well. And so is that something that you've already started exploring and creating, I guess, campaigns based on those insights?
So we're in the process of creating those campaigns. One we actually are working on right now. We want to be mindful of not kind of overdoing marketing campaigns kind of in the onset of product adoption. We have done like really small things to test out what works best before we like really put in a lot of effort to go for it. But what obviously helps, and this is what you said before, is obviously having access to more detailed data on the retail side and feeding that into the marketing experts working together with us is the machine we're currently fine-tuning, and then obviously looking to kind of really double down specifically next year, as we also increase again the number of SKUs in market, the POS that we're in, so that I'd say the multiplier effect is even bigger than it is as we would launch these campaigns right now.
Yeah, it'd be cool to get some like consumer research from these retailers on attitudes towards fermentation in general, as in replacing milk with precision fermentation milk in the future. What do they feel about that? How they're feeling right now? Is that something that you're having to explain on the packaging, especially with, or less so because it's not GMO, right? I guess
Yeah.
you don't really need to go down that route with micro fermentation at all.
No, we don't have to. So what we're seeing actually is interesting. And we also have certain stores where we are in the plant-based section and some stores where we are in the regular animal-based section and some where we have both. So we can also see kind of
Yeah.
how that interacts, which is really interesting.
Which one is working better, by the way? Debate a good few years ago where you'd want plant-based meat alternatives like the Beyond Meat next to the beef burgers, right?
Right,
Just in terms of
right.
convenience. And then people started to switch it up. So where would you say it's now?
It's not conclusive yet, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
But what we can definitely say is that, and I think this has been something that we have been very firm on from the beginning, is that we have launched without a vegan label, and that seems to work really well. I'm a vegan myself, so I was, for years I was looking for vegan products, but I realized also that a lot of the vegans, they know what is vegan and what vegan products are. And a lot of my friends who would be very critical would be like, all these vegan products are shit, I'm not going to buy them. So we didn't want to kind of fall into the trap of speaking to people who have very high level of doubts around vegan products. So we didn't label it vegan, although it is.
So no certifications and nothing even at the
No,
back of the product where the
no,
ingredients are. No mention
no,
at all.
no, no.
Right,
We
right.
we 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 have what we say on the packaging is we call it animal free. Yeah,
Was that decision based on some research that you did, or was
yeah.
it really okay?
Yeah, that was.
That's interesting.
We did a lot of research actually leading up to the launch around consumer perception, around how to talk about it, what to put on packaging. And of course, the kind of pre-launch research is mostly indicative. It's never like super firm because the product is not in front of the consumers, but still there are a couple of things that I think you can say with high certainty that you should or shouldn't do. So that's just kind of the general direction we've been following of the data that we've produced before the launch. The one interesting thing, I guess, not really surprising, but obviously it is different from what a lot of the people were talking about, I guess, in the early days of the industry is, and there might be a difference also between micro fermentation and precision fermentation, but I actually at this moment, I kind of doubt that, is the moment the product hits the shelf, consumers know it's safe. And the interest to learn a lot about the technology and talk a lot about the technology might just be like, the preference of the people like me working in this industry, because we're so excited about what the technology can do, and we want to talk about it all day long, want to explain it to consumers all the time. But the reality is a lot of consumers, they don't care too much. What all they care about is like, can I afford the product? Does it taste good? Is it safe? The moment it's in shelves, they know it's safe, specifically in Europe, right?
Right,
And
right.
then they care about the taste, performance, texture, and the price really. And there is a small segment of people who are really interested, but they're also asking for other products like, what type of production is this? Is this small scale? Is this organic? Do I know the farmer? Like all of these things. But the vast majority of people, they just don't have that much time to be so high involvement with all the products they're buying. That we want to talk about it all the time, but consumers don't, right?
I completely agree. And also, by trying to explain the technology, maybe in messaging or packaging, will probably decrease the likelihood. They'll be thinking about it too much. They'll be like questioning what it is versus trying to make the actual decision to buy it.
Yeah, totally. And we have some information on the packaging. We are referring to our website. We are referring to certain things. Like if someone really wants to find out more or know more, they can. But other than that, I mean, just put a product in shelves that looks great, with great product, with great packaging, good price, and good performance. And I think that's also how you get people really interested about it. I mean, they see it's a new product, but if they like it, then they will try to find out more. And this is kind of how you also build that brand and that trust, that when you put on more SKUs, that you really multiply in the market. So I think that the first job really is creating great products.
Yeah.
Um,
And you mentioned about taste earlier and texture. What's your thoughts on the taste and texture compared to traditional dairy cheeses?
it's always really hard to say, like, to answer that question in like one sentence, because what we've seen in product development is it really depends on what animal product you're putting as a benchmark, right? And so you can see for some of the products that we did, for example, the Greek feta that we're going to be launching, we have like one specific product that we thought this is exactly what we want to have. So you want to get as close as possible to that one benchmark. However, with, for example, a brie, there's so many different products out there that what we are trying to achieve is not to say we're going to match exactly that brand of brie, but actually that you can put it into a range of products with other bries that people say, oh, it's one of those, right? So you're not trying to match one by one a certain established brand or benchmark, but all you want to do is you want to have basically consumers tasting products and not figuring out like, okay, which one is not animal based. And we've done a lot of testing around that. A lot of consumers couldn't tell the difference. It's not 100% there yet where you could say nobody figures it out. There are some people obviously who taste the difference, but we're really close. 70% of consumers couldn't tell the difference. And with animal based, by the way, it was like 85% because still some people thought it's not animal based, even though it was. So even with like the real
Oh,
product, some
right.
people say it's plant based, right? So that's what you're getting. So you're getting pretty close already.
That's really funny. Moving on to more of the regulatory scape,
Mm-hmm.
what are you seeing as the main challenges? Less so, I guess, with micro fermentation, but with precision fermentation derived products, and how you still sort of navigating that as you start to invest more on that side and think about your next scaling products that you'll have with regards to that.
The direction for precision fermentation is rather clear. It's like right now, the plan is to launch in the US next year.
Okay,
So
brilliant. Because of people who have paved the way, like Perfect Day.
not only, but just the regulatory framework is just
Right.
it's clearer, it's quicker, it's more favorable to new technologies. It's just super hard to get that done in Europe. Although we're obviously also preparing for it, but we've seen it with a couple of other precision fermentation players who have handed in novel food dossiers on precision fermented proteins in Europe, and they've all been rejected or stopped because they just were not living up to the requirements of a novel food dossier. You require much more data, much more history, much more explanation, longer processes compared to the US. So how to navigate that? It's, going to the US or going to countries who are a bit more quicker first. The UK right now is, I think, on a really interesting path where they're trying to make UK somewhat of the leader and front runner in novel foods and food technology in Europe, which is going to be super exciting to observe how that's going to play out over the next couple of years. If in fact the UK could be the first European country that really enables the launch of these products or cellular agriculture products on a large scale. So that's going to be interesting. And then with EU novel food environment and also with everything that is going on a policy level, there's a couple of things that are interesting to see, right? I mean, one is just recently EFSA has put on new guidelines on novel food that also allowed for a bit quicker processes, or in best case can save you some time when you hand in dossiers. That's something obviously that we very much welcome, because what we're arguing for also in our conversations with politicians is never to say like lower the requirements of safety, But what we're arguing for is just make the process quicker and more transparent, and also make sure that as a company, you have the opportunity to interact with EFSA and some of the bodies more frequently in a way that they can kind of also guide you in terms of what they want to see and what you need to provide, which in other countries is I think, much more established. And Europe somewhat has this idea of no formal regulatory bodies are not allowed to interact with companies and give them tips basically of how to pass, because that would be, that would be favoring certain companies over others, or that would be kind of not neutral.
Yeah, it kind of
Yeah.
seems crazy. Imagine you're an app developer and you don't get any reasons why your app's been rejected on Android or Apple, right? It doesn't tell you why. So in the same way, that needs to happen. But I guess you're also working with very traditional organizations in governments and politicians. And but it is about speed, isn't it? And getting them on board to have that communication. How much time are you investing in team wise? Like, do you have a big team working on this, trying to speak to these politicians and trying to make this change happen quicker?
So we have Christian, who is our director for public affairs, and Christian is spending a lot of his time on this. I mean, he's also responsible for sustainability, for example. But Christian invests a lot of his time focusing on fostering the dialogue with German policymakers, with the European policymakers. We co-founded Food Fermentation Europe, which is an organization actually, trying to advance the cause and the reason for fermentation in Europe, also on a policy level in Brussels. And then, of course, kind of a couple of people who help with this, and I try to engage with members of parliament, with people in this organization quite frequently. It is a joint effort, right? I mean, we cannot do it everything ourselves. So we're trying to team up with other companies, startups, and incumbents in the industry to try to advance that as much as possible. I just want to say one thing, because sometimes when I or others in this industry talk about policymakers or the EFSA or some of these bodies, it seems like we're kind of like saying the people working there are slow, or they're not really open to these technologies. And I want to make that point very clear, because I've met a lot of these people working for EFSA, and I met a lot of the people working on these policies, and it's actually not the case, right? The people working in these bodies, they're actually very much open and trying to help. I think they're just limited somewhat by the political framework and by the laws really that are in place. And we've seen that over and over again. It's like we just recently had the German biotech symposium, where we engaged with some of the ministers and some of the policymakers around what do we need to change in the laws to actually enable that industry, because it's one of the critical industries that we have all across Europe, also when you think about not only food but material and energy, etc. And what we found is that many times there is openness from everybody involved to actually make processes quicker, to support the industry more. But sometimes just the laws are written in a way that they somewhat are just limited in how much they can do. So sometimes we really have to go down on like a word by word level in Europe specifically, where you have such a bureaucratic process and machinery behind, and really change certain words from, like, let's say sometimes it says or, but it should actually say and. And that is the whole reason why a certain part of the industry is not eligible for public funding, for example, and like all of these things. So it's not about the people working in these bodies. I want to make that clear. It's about the framework that they're provided and we're provided to actually make this happen. And that is a bit frustrating, because I know a lot of people in these bodies who are frustrated with this as well. They're saying, like, we would love to advance this, but our hands are tied, right? So it really comes down to kind of smaller things in the laws and the regulations.
Understood. And as well as Christian, I guess, speaking to these food bodies, associations and politicians, has he been engaging big dairy as well?
Yeah, he's been doing that, and I've been doing that, and Roman has been doing that. So that's an ongoing conversation. And I get the question from my friends all the time. They're like, oh, what you're doing, all the big dairy players, they must be like super anti precision fermentation, micro fermentation, and they're trying to block or push you out of competition. And there are some efforts, of course, always from an established industry to kind of protect their market. In Europe, we have seen that with regulation around how you can call your products. Can you call it cheese? Can you call it dairy? Well, you can't if it doesn't come out of the udder of a mammal. Okay, fair enough. I think it's nonsense, but okay. And then you also see things like, VAT that is higher for plant-based products compared to animal products, like plant-based milk versus real milk and stuff like that, which are the natural moves of an industry or of incumbent players to protect their market. market, and I get it. And that is not different when it comes to food to other industries. At the same time, when we engage with big dairy players and also small dairy players, and some of them, as I said before, are our CMO partners now. These are people, and sometimes we're kind of demonizing a bit the organizations or the big companies. But at the end of the day, there's people in these organizations, and what I find in all of my conversations, really all of my conversations, is at the end of the day, also all these people working there, they care about sustainability. They care about our planet. They care about the animals. They care about consumers. And so what they really also want is best possible products. And a lot of them are really excited about this technology. They're all, of course, they are like a bit suspicious and critical, because they say, yeah, I'm not sure if this will really work at large scale. Can we really replace the products? What will that mean for dairy farmers? There's a lot of unanswered questions, of course. And at the same time, there is a lot of support. There is a lot of excitement. Also from the dairy farmers, by the way, who are already under so much pressure when it comes to cost of production, because many of the small scale players can actually not really make a living, because you need to have massive herds to actually get to economies of scale where you can deliver in a market that is so much under cost pressure as it is right now. And so we're not in the business of replacing dairy farmers. We're in the business of offering a new alternative to the market. And then at the end of the day, if it's a level playing field, consumers will make the choice.
Very well said. Yeah, I think they will. And like you say, there are people in these organizations, they do care about sustainability, and we do want them to react faster. I think that's the mission here, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And this is also, I think, what a big part of our job is as a startup, or as a startup trying to really revolutionize an industry, and also from the other players in the industry, right? So as you're saying, like, how can we motivate these individuals to make to adapt quicker to change, or support change even? I mean, how many people in this industry, alternative proteins, alternative fats, biotech food, AI food companies, how many of the people now leading these companies and working in these companies have actually, are coming from big dairy, are coming from big food companies? Because there's so many people in these organizations who also realize, hey, if I really want to push this forward, I probably need to be, on board with the guys actually revolutionizing this industry. And also a lot of the big players are investing heavily in sustainable production and trying to change the business themselves.
Are you seeing like people who want to work for you coming from these traditional big dairy?
Yes,
Really?
we get a lot of applications from the traditional dairy companies, and we get a lot of applications from big food companies in general. Yeah.
What sort of roles are they sort of applying for?
I mean, on the biotech side, a lot of the people that we have come more from like the traditional biotech industry, right? And when you look on the food side, so in product development, in food science, there is like, I mean, whether you look into, I don't know, Nestle, Danone, Arla, these guys have huge R&D departments, obviously. And so we get a lot of inbound interest from people who have been working in R&D in these companies. And this is where we get more and more, actually, or massively more inbound, is on all operations and commercial related roles. For me, that makes a ton of sense, because people working specifically on the commercial side, I'd say, or on the biz dev side, are people who love stories, and are people who are in love with vision as well. And for a lot of them, it's basically, okay, I work in an established company selling the same products that they have been selling for decades, and there's nothing really new, exciting coming out of this. I probably, with my counterpart on the retail or restaurant side, I'm talking about, a few rounding error points of margin. Great. But then I have a new technology with so much potential of really transforming and becoming kind of, the benchmark really in the industry. This is what people get excited about. And then you have a lot of like senior talent who are also towards the second half of their career thinking about, okay, I have a track record. I have made a name for myself. I have proven I'm good at what I'm doing. Now, the second half of my career, I want to focus on something that I truly believe in. And this is I think the profile that we're getting a lot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like what you said there. I mean, it's true that commercial people, salespeople, they always want a story, a different and a unique story, something different to say to their customers in order to re-engage them. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And so have you actually recruited now people in that, say, commercial department who come from the dairy industry?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
right.
have a couple of people from big dairy.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Last time we spoke a little bit about your journey, your vegan journey. And I think it'll be great to touch on that. I think was it your girlfriend who was vegetarian at the time who basically made you go meat free, I think, and then vegetarian, then eventually vegan? Was that it as far as I remember?
That's right. The only thing that changed that is that she's now my fiance.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, that's right. That's right. She became a vegetarian, and then we had a couple of conversations, and then she pretty quickly after that actually turned to a vegan diet. And then I said, okay, I want to try it out because for me, it was always very clear. I love animals. And the more I talked with her about it and also the consequences on the planet and the environment and also, by the way, on health, depending on, what diet you're eating. And that just made all a lot of sense. And to be honest, I think there's hardly an argument against turning more towards a whole food plant-based diet. I'm not saying you have to be, or I'm not saying it's the best probably for everybody to be 100% vegan, but for pretty much everybody, it makes sense to eat more whole food plant-based diets. I mean, I think that's also well supported by literature. So yeah, I find little people who actually say a plant-based diet is stupid because they know, well, it is ethical, it's more sustainable. And also for most people eating a standard American diet, I would say it would help them to eat a bit more plants anyways.
Yeah.
So it just makes total sense.
And where did that passion for animals come from?
So I grew up in the Swiss countryside, where you're probably a bit closer to nature and to animals in general than, for example, growing up in a big city. And we had a couple of farms close by. When I went on summer vacation with my sister, we went to dairy farmers, etc. And I just always loved animals in general. I grew up with dogs and cats. Our dog was my best friend, and I just built a very strong connection to some of these animals where for me it's so clear, like when you are close to animals, they have emotions, they feel pain, they strive for living a good life as well, and they're actually so close to us in so many ways. Came to really appreciate and love animals, and if you and these years actually I'm rediscovering my connection to nature even more, just the sheer beauty of life and creation expressed through like these different forms of animals and plants, by the way, as well. But it's just breathtaking, and it's worth protecting, and it's worth appreciating, and there is life force in all of these beings. And so kind of taking care of them and not unnecessarily hurt them, damage them, and taking care is, I think, for me, very natural. And I think probably natural for all human beings, just that lots of us, maybe through the way that we grew up in our societies, never really felt that connection, but I think it's natural.
Yeah. And how are you exploring that nature side at the moment? Are you just spending more time outdoors, taking a break from work, the round that you raised, and then reaching that climax, you need to sort of be grounded again in the natural environment? So what are you actually doing to explore that?
When I started a company, I moved from Switzerland to Germany, to Berlin. And obviously Berlin is like the complete opposite of the Swiss countryside. And at first I was like, oh, happy to get away from like, the slow paced environment in Switzerland. And I really jumped fully into kind of like the urban city life here in Berlin, which is a lot beautiful things to offer as well. But these days I feel just a call to be out in nature much more often. So I travel back to Switzerland, spend some more time in the mountains. From time to time, like on the weekends, I go out to Brandenburg in the north of Berlin, try to kind of be out there, renting a cabin, going on a walk, swimming in the lakes. And I realize how that just helps me to reconnect with myself, with nature, to calm down. And sometimes specifically running a company like Formo, or any tech company for that matter, and being always so focused on like scaling, quicker, doing more with less resources, raising money, kind of crushing it, sprinting every day, all the time, thinking about the company 24/7 on Saturday, Sunday, first thing you wake up, last thing you do when you go to bed. There is moments of reflection that are super important, I think. And nature is the perfect place to kind of tune in and reflect on, I think, some of the most important questions that we have. So yeah, this is what I'm doing, I guess.
That's brilliant. And I think it's super important to do that. What would you say now, I guess, just to close off, would you say is your boldest predictions of how fermentation, whether it's precision fermentation, microfermentation, alternative proteins, will shape the future of food by 2000 and say 35?
It's good that you say 2035. We have our vision 2030.
Either or, you can either go 30 or 35.
So we're a big fan of super freaking bold predictions. And our own vision for the company is to become the biggest dairy producer of Europe by 2030. And that is obviously, people are familiar with the big, hairy, audacious goals. They know why we set a vision that kind of audacious. And at the same time, we understand that we cannot do it ourselves. So a lot of other things need to happen for that to work. If you're asking me 2035 and wider industry, I think that more than 50% of all dairy products will be non-animal sourced by 2035.
Right. And when do you think it could be 100%?
I don't think it ever will be 100%, really 100%. There's always going to be a place for local production in topographies where animal farming actually does make sense. And also just for the matter of heritage, I envision a future in which, like, children growing up will be like, what? You used to source this from animals? How did that work? Why would you do that? And you would have like some people who still know the times of like sourcing milk from animals would be like, no, but I still want to have it that way. It's a traditional way of doing it, somewhat like even a cultural artifact, right?
Yeah.
I think that honestly, I mean, those time horizons are super hard to predict. Even 10 years, like, so much can happen. But I think within 20 years, the technology will be so far advanced that just from the pure perspective of cost and functionality, it won't make any sense anymore to actually source the big part of this from animals. Just because if you think, I mean, right, the industry is still so young. If you're thinking about it, right? I mean, obviously the underlying technologies that come out of biotech, they have been around for 50 years, plus or minus. Some of them are rather new, and the space is developing so quickly. Also, what is happening now with computational bio, AI, using data to kind of be more targeted in experimental design and designing these proteins. And today we're all talking about, can we scale this? Are the proteins as functional? Are they, can we do the same products? But I mean, everybody working in this industry and knowing what's going on already sees that this is just kind of like the first step, but there's so much more to come of making these proteins, more functional. Proteomics and protein design. I mean, there's already companies out there who work on designer proteins. And today everybody's asking, yeah, but completely novel proteins, you will have problems getting those to market because of regulation. But that's changing. That's changing. The fermentation technologies are getting better. The downstream processing is getting more cost efficient. The scale of production is getting bigger. The models are getting more accurate. You can produce products that are more nutritious than what you can do from animals. You can produce products that are completely novel, and everything just points towards a reality in which the targeted way of fermentation production in food is so superior to animals, also in terms of cost, that there will be no reason to not have this as the absolutely dominating technology in food in general. And this is really what we're seeing. Like the Nestle's of the past and this century, I think what is happening right now is it's the emergence of a technology that will just be completely dominating food production in the middle of the century or towards the end of the century. For me, there's no question about it. Everything is pointing towards the fact that this technology will take over. Will it take 10 years? Will it take 20 years? I don't know, but it will take over.
I definitely look forward to you and the rest of the team at Formo to reach that goal, ideally by that time frame or quicker. We do want it to happen quicker. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us this great update.
Thanks so much, Alan, for inviting me, and hope that listeners really enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, and
I'll
speak to you again soon.
speak to you again soon.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
I think that more than 50% of all dairy products will be non-animal sourced by 2035.
Right. And when do you think it could be 100%?
I don't think it ever will be 100%, really 100%. There's always going to be a place for local production in topographies where animal farming actually does make sense. And also just for the matter of heritage, I envision a future in which, like, children growing up will be like, what? You used to source this from animals? How did that work? Why would you do that? And you would have like some people who still know the times of like sourcing milk from animals would be like, no, but I still want to have it that way. It's a traditional way of doing it, somewhat like even a cultural artifact, right?
Yeah.
I think that honestly, I mean, those time horizons are super hard to predict. Even 10 years, like, so much can happen. But I think within 20 years, the technology will be so far advanced that just from the pure perspective of cost and functionality, it won't make any sense anymore to actually source the big part of this from animals. Just because if you think, I mean, right, the industry is still so young. if you're thinking about it, right? I mean, obviously the underlying technologies that come out of biotech, they have been around for 50 years, plus or minus some of them. Some of them are rather new, and the space is developing so quickly. Also, what is happening now with computational bio, AI, using data to kind of be more targeted in experimental design and designing these proteins. And today we're all talking about, can we scale this? Are the proteins as functional? Are they, can we do the same products? But I mean, everybody working in this industry and knowing what's going on already sees that this is just kind of like the first step, but there's so much more to come of making these proteins, more functional. Proteomics and protein design. I mean, there's already companies out there who work on designer proteins. And today everybody's asking, yeah, but completely novel proteins, you will have problems getting those to market because of regulation. But that's changing. That's changing. The fermentation technologies are getting better. The downstream processing is getting more cost efficient. The scale of production is getting bigger. The models are getting more accurate. You can produce products that are more nutritious than what you can do from animals. You can produce products that are completely novel, and everything just points towards a reality in which the targeted way of fermentation production in food is so superior to animals, also in terms of cost, that there will be no reason to not have this as the absolutely dominating technology in food in general. And this is really what we're seeing. Like the Nestle's of the past and this century, I think what is happening right now is it's the emergence of a technology that will just be completely dominating food production in the middle of the century or towards the end of the century. For me, there's no question about it. Everything is pointing towards the fact that this technology will take over. Will it take 10 years? Will it take 20 years? I don't know, but it will take over.
I definitely look forward to you and the rest of the team at Formo to reach that goal, ideally by that time frame or quicker. We do want it to happen quicker. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us this great update.
Thanks so much, Alan, for inviting me, and hope that listeners really enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, and speak to you again soon.
Speak to you again soon.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.